We are glad to be welcoming Adam Schiff back to Bakersfield here. Can you talk to us about the importance of coming through Bakersfield? This is really an energy-rich area of the state. We're having issues right now as far as exporting oil is concerned, and we have now a governor who is throwing in a minimum refinery minimums for his plans going forward. It's released some concerns, I should say, from the governors of Nevada and Arizona as far as energy goes to see its potential impacts on the market. What would your role in Washington be for oil and gas here in the Central Valley, and particularly here in Bakersfield?
First of all, great to see you, and I have enjoyed my many visits to Bakersfield and throughout the Valley. I have, really tried to communicate the message to folks that this is a really important part of the state to me, that I intend to be as aggressive a champion of the Central Valley and each of the cities and rural areas as any other part of California. And I like to start out with a thank you for all the incredible agriculture that the Central Valley produces, because it's putting food on all our tables, including mine. So this is going to be very important for me. In terms of the energy environment, we're in a period of global transition where countries are moving to renewable sources of energy. And we're seeing that in Kern County, which has not only been a big oil producer, but has also become a big renewable energy producer. And that transition is going to continue. It's inevitable. It's driven by, I think, the reduced cost of renewable energy compared to fossil fuels. We want to make sure that during that transition that people can continue to enjoy good employment, that they have good economic opportunities. And so what I would like to do with the folks from Bakersfield and Kern County and elsewhere is continue to sit down with folks and ask them what they would like to see for their future, what kind of jobs they would like to see come to Bakersfield, what concerns they have as the economy transitions to more renewable sources of energy. I want to make sure no one is left behind. And so that's going to be very, very important to me.
Talking about putting food on the table, you mentioned agriculture, farm workers are big deal here, and a lot of them happen to be immigrants. And during my time here, I've spoken to a lot of people that mention that a big portion of this populace tends to be undocumented, and they're often exploited. I know in your stances you mentioned you'd support something similar to an immigration reform. I don't know, would you still support something like that? I mean, there's a lot of people here that continue to be taken advantage of due to their lack of status.
I do strongly support a comprehensive immigration reform. We know what we really need to do. We know we need a pathway to citizenship for people who are here who are undocumented. We need an immediate form of relief for the dreamers, for the temporary protective status holders. We know we need those that are working so hard in our fields to help put food on our table. And so a comprehensive reform that also has security measures for our border, I think makes sense to most Democrats and Republicans. It has been a real challenge to get it done. I'm determined to do whatever is necessary so that we finally have comprehensive immigration reform. I don't support the Trump agenda of mass deportations, which I think would be devastating to millions of families, devastating to our economy, certainly devastating to the agriculture industry. And so unlike my opponent in the race, I don't support Donald Trump or his MAGA agenda. But I do support a comprehensive immigration reform.
A little bit more about that. A huge portion of the population here tends to be Latino, and they don't tend to go out and vote in droves as people often hope they do. I guess what would be a message for the people that are watching at home that happen to be Latino that might not be so enthused about voting? What would you tell them?
I would say, I think the most important issues that I hear about in the Latino community are not unlike the issues I hear more broadly. That is, people can't afford their home. They can't afford to buy a home, or they can't afford their rent. For young people in particular, the dream of home ownership seems to have even moved further away from them. We need to bring down the cost of housing. And in order to do that, we need to build hundreds of thousands of new units of housing pretty much every year. We need to make sure that we can build it affordably, that we can build it quickly, That's going to be a top priority for me, bringing down the cost of housing by producing a lot more housing. I also want to see a renter's tax credit so that people that can't buy a home right now, not yet, get some help on their taxes when they're renters. If you're lucky enough to own a home, you can write off your mortgage. If you're a renter, you get no help at all. I don't think that's right. Childcare is a huge issue within the Latino community and more broadly. And it's a huge issue because it's hard to find, it's often unaffordable, and too many people are kept out of the workforce because they would earn less than they have to pay in childcare. This most particularly impacts women, and it most particularly impacts Latino women, and that needs to be addressed. No family should be spending more than 5 or 10% of their income on childcare. So I'm going to put a laser-like focus on that issue as well. We need to bring down other costs, also like the cost of medicine and healthcare. I'm also deeply concerned about the collapse in rural healthcare and how hospitals are going out of business, like the hospital in Madera, and want to make sure that we get the doors of those hospitals reopened and put our hospitals on a solid footing.
And last couple questions for you. I just wanted to ask you, as it goes to homelessness in this area, we were talking about housing affordability too. With homelessness, this has been a particular struggle here in the Central Valley for lots of folks, and especially here in Bakersfield. And of course, it's been difficult getting folks treatment as well. We were wondering, where do you stand on the Prop 36 debate here in California?
In terms of housing, I think you're absolutely right. And this is a surprise to people that are not in rural areas, and that is rural rents are going up often faster than rents anywhere else. As a percentage of the overall cost. And so folks need help bringing down the rent and staying in their homes. I remember talking to one young woman who was telling me how her rent kept going up and up. She had graduated from college probably 10 years ago, but was still paying student loans. And between her rising rent and her student loans, she had nothing left to save, nothing for the future. And she was terrified. And this is the reality, I think, for millions and millions of people in California and around the country. So we need to create more housing if we're going to bring down rents. As long as housing is scarce, people can raise their rent at will. We also have to tackle the problem of corporate interests and private equity interests buying up real estate, buying up apartment buildings as investment vehicles, and then just jacking up the rent. So we need to go after those sources of rent increases. In terms of the propositions, you're asking about the crime measure?
Yeah, the crime measure and the one that's related to homelessness, drug addiction, and theft reduction.
On the crime stuff, I think it makes sense to be able to aggregate several thefts that might be misdemeanors separately to be a felony if people are engaged in multiple thefts. The legislature has already addressed that issue in the waning days of the legislature. So I'm going to look at what the legislature has done, what the proposition does beyond what the legislature has done, and make a judgment about that. That measure, as far as I can see, and I have to study it more, is more about retail theft and substance abuse addiction than it is about housing. But of course, substance abuse can lead to people being unhoused. I think there, in terms of the homelessness epidemic we have in California, in addition to building a lot more housing and bringing down the cost of housing, we need to make sure that people who are homeless because they have a serious substance abuse problem or mental health issue have those issues addressed, get the wraparound services and care they need. Otherwise, we can move people off the street and into shelter, but they won't stay sheltered if they still have the same substance abuse or mental health problem to begin with.
I know you mentioned a little bit earlier during this interview maternal mortality rates and that hospitals have been closing down OBGYNs. That's been happening here in Kern County, particularly in Ridgecrest, and this particularly impacts women of color, Black and Latino women. I guess, what would you do to improve hospitals or prevent them from closing down? What would be the solution to that?
I think there are a couple of things we need to do. First and most important, we need to improve the reimbursement rates under Medi-Cal and under Medicare, but most particularly under Medi-Cal, which in parts of the state that have lower incomes, the hospitals' patients are almost entirely reliant on Medi-Cal. They're not getting sufficient reimbursements from the federal government to be able to keep their doors open. And you can only do that for so long. So we have to raise reimbursement rates. That's something I'm working at the federal level. But we also need to give incentives to people to serve in the healthcare profession in rural areas. There's a real problem attracting the workforce. And we're going to have to pay people better in order to attract them to provide that vital care.
Well, Representative, thank you so much for taking the time with us today. We really appreciate it, giving some time and some love here to the Central Valley. We hope the legislative session treats you well, and we look forward to speaking with you some more on the road to November.
Forward to it. As I mentioned, Central Valley is a super important part of my campaign, but part of California. And my thanks again to all of your viewers who are putting food on my table. Greatly appreciated.